Hey everybody, only one of the serves here today. This is Lance, and we're going to be talking about The Death of Stalin. It's a brand new movie by Armando Lannucci, the hilarious director of In the Loop, a movie we both absolutely love. Also the Veep series. Really talented guy, and he has kind of a knack for making hilarious comedies out of otherwise somewhat dark, controversial, or frustrating experiences, such as the political system in the US. The Death of Stalin is no exception. It is an absolutely hilarious film that deals with some pretty dark history. So we are going to come out with a full review of that movie, but I wanted to take this video to talk to you a little bit about what was true and what was fiction. The Death of Stalin is a really complicated thing to talk about, and this video is going to be exploring some of the things that were, really accurate about the movie and some of the things that were either made up or stretching the truth. It's really hard to judge a movie based on its historical accuracy when the film at the end of the day is a comedy. I mean, this is a dark black comedy. It's got people doing American accents and British accents all over the place. With a grain of salt, I definitely watched it not thinking that it was actually going to be as historically accurate as it was. So it's not a complete fabrication, and like most things, it stretches the truth a little bit, and it's also talking about a subject that is really difficult to talk about because it's still shrouded in mystery. Most of the accounts about the death of Stalin happen to be part of that, revisionist history, where we have had several different novels, several different accounts, several different memoirs, many different people saying many different things. And because it was such a complicated and downright batty, insane time, it's really hard to pinpoint stuff down. But we're going to go through the movie. Of course, spoiler warnings ahead. We will be dealing with spoilers for the film, but I mean, when the name of the movie is The Death of Stalin, I think, the biggest spoiler is already in the title. So it's all to do with history that has already occurred. So this happened in the 50s. So at the end of the day, I mean, yeah, there's spoilers, but I don't think the movie will be ruined for you in any way by watching this video. So to start with, the start of the movie featured a piano concerto where Mozart's Piano Concerto No.3 was being broadcast on the radio. It is entirely based on a true story where it was actually when the concerto had finished, they received a call from Stalin himself, who was asking to have a recording of it so he could listen to it later that night. This is actually one of those stories where the true version of it is more insane than the movie. So in the movie, what happens is, Stalin calls them. They realize they hadn't had a recording of it. Half the audience had already left. So they started to bring people in from the streets in order to fill the audience back up and then re-redo the entire recording all again. They also didn't have a conductor for the recording, so they had to wake someone up in the middle of the night, come down there, and basically act as the conductor for the concerto so that Stalin would never know the difference. In truth, the conductor that they brought in was actually the third conductor that they had to bring in, because the first two they brought in were just too drunk to do it. They brought in one conductor, he was completely wasted, and it was unacceptable. They brought in a second, and it was the third conductor that came in. That was the one capable of pulling off the fake second concerto to deliver to Stalin. The other part that was a little bit loose was there was a character called Udina, whose family was killed by Stalin, and she slipped a note into the recording sleeve that told Stalin just what she thought of him. Now, in reality, Stalin actually sent her a gift of 20,000 rubles after receiving the record, and she responded with a thank you note in which she wrote, "I will pray for the day and night and ask the Lord to forgive your great sins before the people and the country." So it wasn't quite as strongly worded as the one that she slipped in, but yes, there was a pianist who ended up writing a letter to Stalin denouncing his actions. So the next part was Stalin's love of American Western cowboy films, which seems very odd because we're talking about, the leader of the Communist Party, and why would he ever be obsessed with Western media, let alone Western cowboy films and John Wayne? That is entirely based on truth. Stalin was renowned for loving movies. He had full movie theaters installed in any one of the homes that he lived in, and he was also a huge fan of Westerns. So yeah, that's entirely true. So the next part was Stalin's death, which occurs pretty early in the film, and this one is a difficult one to track down. There's several different versions. Some people believe that Stalin died from a stroke. Some people believe he died from a heart attack. Some people believe that he died from a combination of either. Or some people believe that he had a stroke. He lied down for something like 10 or 12 hours before the team of doctors was assembled. It's really hard to say. This is also a case in which the assemblage of the doctor team that eventually saw Stalin is based on a true problem Stalin had, which was called the doctor's plot. So Stalin was incredibly paranoid in the later years of his life and genuinely believed that there was a Zionist conspiracy by Jewish doctors living in Russia to kill him or poison him. He was also incredibly paranoid of being poisoned in general. So as part of this, he did either execute or jail all the most prominent doctors in Moscow, which happened to be Jewish doctors. So the ones that weren't either dead or in the gulags were either incredibly young or incredibly old. So the team that is assembled and eventually seen to take care of Stalin was a team of multiple doctors between 10 and 12 who, yes, were incredibly young and incredibly old doctors. The second part that is a little tricky is whether or not Stalin was actually poisoned, because it is documented that Stalin did drink either a fizzy drink or juice before he perished, so a glass of that was found. There is some theories that it happened to be Beria who had motivation to murder Stalin. Of course, there is still no way of proving that, since the story of what happened later in the succession is one of huge contestation. So next on the list is Beria, the possible villain, depending on how you want to look at the film, but he was the one assumed to become the natural successor eventually to Stalin, and I'm not talking about successor in the chain of command, we'll get to him later, but Beria was the one who was eventually murdered at the end of the film without trial, shot in the face. So most of this is actually true. Beria was a horrific person. He pleasured in the torture of a lot of the people that were captured. He was also a notorious child rapist. That is also true. I mean, you know, for the purposes of comedy, even a dark comedy, they didn't touch on that too much until the very end of the film where they mentioned it. But yeah, he was renowned for that as well. He was known as a ruthless political tactician. He may or may not have poisoned Stalin. This is, you know, something that is contested by historians, but mostly believed not to be true because of the fact that Stalin probably died from a stroke, which the poisoning would not have caused. Although Stalin did have severe stomach problems right around the time of his death as well, which could have been something to do with poison. Both the NKVD, the secret police unit, and Beria were horrific and scary figures, and you know, decently portrayed in the movie. Now, Beria was not actually shot in the face. He was given a trial in which there was no defense for him and eventually hanged. And apparently a mock trial was also held in which a body double was used to demonstrate Beria. He was assassinated. The problem with this is that this is a, you know, maybe a 2-hour film, and at the end of the day, the events are depicted in the movie, which happened roughly within the span of a week, happened obviously in about 4 to 5 months in real life. So that would have taken a bit too much time to do. So yes, it's very compressed timeline-wise. But Beria was eventually assassinated by the rest of his political rivals. Next is Khrushchev, played by Steve Buscemi, which is a kind of a weird casting choice considering what Khrushchev was like supposedly in real life. But nevertheless, Steve Buscemi did a great job portraying him. And to take it in historical terms, yes, what went down was pretty similar to what Khrushchev eventually pulled in terms of a coup. He did get the army to take down the NKVD, make them stand down in order to regain control of the city and ultimately the state. He did rise to power. He did plot to get Beria assassinated with the assistance of Georgy Zhukov, which was the military commander at the time. And yes, staged a successful coup to assume ultimate power. And that was how the line of succession went from Stalin to Khrushchev. Now, Molotov, which his name actually is forever immortalized in the weapon used by poor rebels, a bottle filled with gasoline and exploded, was played by Michael Palin. And that was a really good casting choice, just because Michael Palin just has an incredible ability to be affable. And that worked really good in his favor. Molotov, at the end of the day, was a ruthlessly dedicated member of Stalin's regime. He was, he did abstain on the vote in which his wife was arrested. He was obviously very upset about it, but he was ultimately okay with it because he was ready to toe party lines. He said, quote, "Because I am a member of the Politburo," the Politburo was the enclave of basically Stalin's inner circle. "Because I am a member of the Politburo and I must obey party discipline," was the reason that he allowed his wife to be jailed. But unlike the film, and this is where there was a slight difference, he wasn't just suddenly given back Polina as a gift by Beria. It was actually his birthday on the same day as Stalin's funeral. And when he was asked, "Is there anything you wanted?" he very coldly said, "Give me back Polina." So he immediately asked for it as soon as Stalin was no longer in the picture. Finally, Stalin's children. So there was Svetlana, who was kind of portrayed as a doe in a henhouse. She is somewhat accurate to the real Svetlana. It was true that Svetlana was adored by the people. I mean, it was a dictatorship, so it wasn't a monarchy, but at the same time, she was kind of viewed as the people's princess, if you may say so. She didn't actually get escorted off by Khrushchev and then disappeared into infamy. She worked for a long time as a translator, and then eventually she defected to the US in 1967, which was obviously a huge propaganda blow to the USSR. And then there's Stalin's son, Vasily. He was probably the most accurate of all the characters. He was just as spoiled, megalomaniac, drunk as he's shown in the movie. He was constantly promoted to military positions he did not deserve. He was constantly drunk, reckless, becoming a huge embarrassment to the entire USSR. And that story of him ordering a plane to crash the players on the national hockey team is actually entirely true. So, yeah, like many things in this movie, there's so many moments where the truth was a lot. Well, you think the truth is stranger than fiction, but it actually these things were accurate. I mean, this is one of the reasons I think, and we'll get into this when we talk about the review. But I think this is the reason this was a really good choice to do as kind of a dark comedy, even though the subject matter is very, very dark. Is that some of it is just so ridiculous. Like, you watch the movie, and if you're, maybe you should go into the movie blind for the first time, and I'm saying this at the end of the video, so this is a bad recommendation, but when you watch it and you just think, well, this is insane, like, this never happened, this is obviously just exaggerated for effect. You know, a lot of it is, a lot of the comedic timing is, there isn't, you know, there wasn't hallways where just cadavers were rolling around on the floor screaming, like, "Hail Stalin," while they're being shot in the face, and every single hallway was full of these bodies. But the overwhelming paranoia and the suspicion and the fact that anyone could be charged or deemed an enemy of the state at any time, the constant living in fear, that was all very, very true and portrayed very, very accurately. Yeah, so stay tuned, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video. Subscribe for more videos. Of course, it helps us make more content. Listen to the Serfs podcast at weareserfs.com. And stay tuned for our full review of the Death of Stalin coming up.